At the worst point of this, I had every window covered up. I was working on my laptop out of my bed. I was afraid to get out of my bed. I would go running. I would strategically think what I wanted out of my fridge to eat or drink, and I would strategically count to 3, and I would run to get what I wanted and would run back to my bed because I was too afraid to think who was videoing me. Were they looking in?
I'm so sorry.
Testimony continued today in the most notorious criminal trial in Richland County history. Dr. John Boyle is accused of killing his wife Noreen and burying her body in the basement of his new home in Erie, Pennsylvania.
The 12-year-old son finally took the stand.
As I heard a scream, I heard a thud. It was about this loud.
We, the jury, find the defendant guilty.
When I was 12 years old, my testimony sent my father to prison for murdering my mother. This podcast serves as a type of therapy and reconciliation for myself, and it is my hope that it helps anyone who has experienced deception, betrayal, and dark trauma. I'm Collier Landry, and this is Moving Past Murder. Hey movers, welcome back to another episode of Moving Past Murder. I'm your host, Collier Landry, and what's going on? What's going on, guys? Another Friday. I've got a great episode in store for you guys. Man, I am tired. I just got back a couple of days ago from visiting my friends and family in Mansfield, Ohio, which is where I'm from. And it was a whirlwind trip. I was there for, like 48 hours, maybe a little more. Got to catch up with some family, got to catch up with some friends. I got to see my 3 nephews, Logan, Lachlan, and Lennox, who just wanted me to play baseball with them. And it was really fun. My adopted mother's side of the family had a family reunion that I came in town for because I had not seen some of these relatives in almost 20 years, which was really cool. And, as a lot of you know, I don't have any real connection with my birth family. Having been abandoned when the murder happened and remanded to the foster care system, I don't have a lot of contact with people, which is unfortunate, but it is what it is. But I do have a wonderful adopted family that is supportive of me. And I got to see some of those family members that I haven't seen in a really long time. And of course, my nephew is my favorite. I also got to see some friends. I got to see my dear friend, Jason Klein. I got to see my dear friend who's, my personal superhero, Dave Messmore, who was a detective from my mother's case, and his wife, Sue. I got to hang out with them a little bit and talk to them. I actually shot some TikTok content with them, and some Patreon content. Your support means the world to me. And for those of you that are watching this on YouTube, please remember to click like and subscribe. It helps with the algorithm. I want to give a few shout outs to those people who I saw in Mansfield. So I went to the Westbrook Country Club and to see my dear friend, Shelly Seckel, who Shelly has been in my life since I moved to Mansfield when I was like 5 years old. And she actually worked for my orthodontist. And, we were posing for a picture and she said, "Oh, smile by Martz," because my doctor was Dr. Martz, who is my orthodontist. I got to see Shelly and Dan at Westbrook Country Club. I got to meet their dear friend and massive Moving Past Murder fan, Debbie Adams from Ontario. Sue and Bob Kleckner came out. They showed their support. They have hooked me up with a very special guest I'm going to interview this weekend, who is very personal to me and has a massive connection to my father's case. So it is going to be a great interview. I'm stoked. Can't wait to interview this guy. I also want to give a special shout out to Matt and Annie Trammell, who are actually the ones who live in my house in Mansfield. And I got to go back and shoot some very exclusive content, not only for Patreon, but also for my TikTok channel. So you guys got to check it out. If you found me on TikTok, welcome to the program. And everyone that I saw back in Mansfield, despite what you guys might think about me leaving as a young man going out and pursuing the world, I still really do feel a deep connection with all of my Mansfield people, my Mansfield family, my Ontario Warriors, where I graduated in, 1996. Oh man, that was a while ago, but I still feel like an 18-year-old, that's for sure. Or at least I act like one, maybe. That's probably more accurate. But no, in all seriousness, I love my hometown and I love all the support and love that I get from you guys. It was a great trip. It was a fun trip, but I am tired. On Saturday, I was actually on and honored to be a guest on the Minds of Madness podcast. Tyler Allen, Beck, and the writer Ryan, they did an amazing job with my episode. It is called The Brass Ring. It is episode number 137 of the Minds of Madness podcast. And they just did me such a solid. Now, for those of you that have never listened to Minds of Madness, it is like listening to a documentary. The audio quality is absolutely superb. It puts me to shame. And I have to be honest, they did such an amazing job with my story. I was crying at the end of it. They put in so much love and care into their show. That's why they're so successful. You know, they're with Wondery. They've done an amazing job being a supporter of this program, giving me shout outs. And I just love Tyler, Beck, and Ryan so much, and the whole team over at Minds of Madness, because guess what? You know why they're so nice? Because they're all Canadian. Tyler and I bonded when we met at CrimeCon because I was at Hot Docs a couple of years ago where my film, A Murder in Mansfield, premiered, and he actually won an award at Hot Docs for his sound design because he's an amazing sound designer. And if you listen to the program, again, episode number 137 of Minds of Madness, it is called The Brass Ring. And that all relates back to my mother who told me to grab the brass ring in life. But it is so well done. I can't highly recommend them and thank them enough for being a part of the program. Thank you so much to everyone that supports this program. Whether you are just downloading it and listening every week, whether you're watching on YouTube, hopefully you're doing both, or whether you subscribe to my Patreon and you support there. I want to give a big shout out to my latest Patreon supporter, Daniela Klobuchar, and she discovered me on that Minds of Madness podcast. You know, she writes me on Instagram, and I want to read her message this week. She says, Collier, I heard your story on the Minds of Madness podcast, and it was one that really got me. I am a single mom to my 6-year-old son, and I could never imagine what life for him would be like if I wasn't around. The bond you had with your mom reminds me of what I have with my son. Your courage as a 12-year-old was incredible. The message you tell today is one that has stuck with me. Some days feel hard and I keep asking, why am I going through this alone? But I need to change it around to what now? Thank you for sharing your story. You are incredible and such an inspiration, Daniela. Daniela, thank you so much for reaching out. Thank you for supporting the program on Patreon. Anyways, this week's episode is a tough one. Often when I speak to survivors who have gone through major trauma, not everyone is as open as I am. And not everyone can be as open as I am because there's a lot of legal things that go on with situations where people, and this particular, my guest today is Kimberly Miner. She runs the nonprofit envisionuvictory.org, and she is a survivor of a really bad stalking case and an abusive situation that she was in for. And she had the courage to reach out to me on Instagram and share her story with me. And I said, I'd love for you to be on the program and give some tips to my audience, because I do have a lot of people that are victims of domestic abuse, that are victims of stalking, that are victims of coercive control. And I feel like, you know, and my mother was also a victim of that. I mean, it doesn't have to be that way for everyone. So I really hope you guys glean a lot of insight from her. You know, this particular person, you terrorized her for a very long time, and even so much so as to not even letting her get on with her life, where she could actually just have a business. And this person was sending bad messages to her colleagues and to her employers and trying to get her fired, and just really trying to sabotage every aspect of her life to control it, so this individual could control everything about her and loop her back in to his ring of madness, if you will. It's tough because I can, you know, as she shared with me, as she shares with you guys in the program this week, it is something that still really affects her. And it is something that she, you know, has to really live with every day. And you know, I really commend her strength. Now, she has gone on to pass a law and work with her state representatives in her home state of Arizona to make sure that things like this don't happen to other victims. So again, her nonprofit, envisionyouvictory.org. She's really helping victims, and I've referred her to some friends of mine that have also been through similar situations that are looking for help and support. So I am pleased to welcome to the program this week, Kimberly Miner. My guest today is Kimberly Miner. Kimberly, thank you so much for joining us.
Absolutely. Thanks so much for having me on, Collier.
So Kimberly, you and I had chatted a little bit. We met actually because you had seen my documentary, correct?
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, I watched your documentary, and I think I watched every single one of your podcasts at this point.
Oh, wow. Okay, cool. Thank you so much. So Kimberly, you sort of delved into a little bit of your story with me, but why don't you start from sort of the beginning on what has happened and some of the impacts that you've been able to make because of your story?
Yeah, I kind of reached out to you because I had a huge interest when you had your podcast with Chris on the cybersecurity and having to deal, with having to be very careful with the, stalking that goes on with, romance and, security, having to do around with your personal life and stuff. And I, reached out and said, I thought that was such a great piece that you did. It touched on, my personal journey that I dealt with my own personal stalker, that it was a lot of great information, and that, you delved into, some great information, but it actually is just, several areas of stalking. There are so many different rabbit holes that you can go down when it comes to stalking. And one of the biggest things when it comes to this area that you're diving into is that there is so many gray areas that the judicial system is so far from catching up to, and what is acceptable and what is not acceptable, and what is the personal thought processes of what is believed that we are putting ourselves up for when we decide to play out on the internet. And so I thought it was a great, opportunity to reach out to you and talk to you about of just how devastating and how it, putting yourself out there in the internet of, what it can do and how it can destroy a person's life.
Why don't you take us back a little bit to how you came into all of this?
It was not by choice.
Sure.
It was something that I was completely unaware of. And it was something that was done to me out of spite. And it was a control and done out of my stalker wanting to destroy me, and taking that power and using it as a weapon to take information and twist the plot and how that story went. And that's easy to do when you put that on social media.
Essentially what this is you were building a business. You had a business, and you were part of Facebook groups, or you were part of social media groups, and this person who had this obsession for you would literally insert themselves into every aspect of your life in an attempt to wall you off from the world. Is that what you're saying?
I think of a lot of the things that you talk about, in your story, when you're talking about, defense attorneys taking pictures and stuff, and they twist how the pictures are presented,
Yeah, the order which they're presented. Yeah.
You twist the dialect of how that story is presented. It's so easy to do that on social media, because who's there to defend you? Who's there to tell that story is not, correct, or that it's not the way that it's presented. And, in the moment that goes up, how many people are seeing that and within seconds have a thought process and have an opinion and start giving their advice or giving their opinions and putting things out there. And it can completely although somebody says, oh, it only lasts so long before something else is up there, but yet the damage starts not only the opinion they have at you at that second, but it's about how you feel about yourself, and how do you start coming around the corner, or how do you start wrapping your brain around it, and then you're having to go through this whole thing of going through this explanation of saying, well, that's not how it is, and then you're having this what I call it is this autopsy of like having to dissect it, and you're in this continuous downfall of like dissecting things over and over and over and over and over and over and over again. And if somebody does this to you 24 hours a day, all day long, 7 days a week, and it goes on and on and on and on and on, you get into a place where you don't feel like it's like crazy making. You're like, well, maybe you start to question it. You're like, well, maybe the story wasn't as like I thought it was. Maybe it's
I mean, that's textbook gaslighting, right? Is that the perpetrator, whoever you're dealing with, they make you feel like you're going crazy, like, and they just basically change the narrative. But I guess I just want to get into, so who do you know your stalker?
Yes,
and
I do.
And do you feel comfortable telling us like how you met them and what you went through? Like,
I have to be careful
was it a relationship?
because I have I live under an address confidentiality, so I have to protect my like my boundaries. And also we have court records that we sign that I will not say anything that is derogatory towards this person that would hold me responsible. What I will say is that we know each other personally. This is a personal. We know each other personally on a very personal level. So this person has a personal, vendetta to, he feels like this person feels like they've been wronged, and it goes to the point of, they have personally, done things that have been very hurtful towards me. They have done things that have put me in a position of being, harmed. I've been a crime victim of theirs. So, those are the parameters of the situation. Their setup of the situation is that, they, wound up being in a situation where they could not have access to me. So the next step was then, if I can't have access to you, I have been put in situations that, now, I look like, my name has, been tarnished. Now I'm going to ante up, and this person is very much a narcissist and a sociopath. So, and there's two things to, as you know, is that when somebody of that nature, and they're have access to you or ability to try to get to you, is that when they are called out on the carpet, is that they're going to one up you, and if they are called out by the police and they're called out by the court system, then now it's vengeance, and they're gonna show you.
So they don't even, so when you're dealing with a type of person like this, you're finding that it is, it's not even, like, they have no regard for the law, right?
No.
So they have no parameters or sense of decorum that normal people in society say, okay, well, enough, she's called the police, or, now I'm going to court dealing with this. Like, that doesn't deter them from their actions, correct? They just keep going. They don't stop.
No, they what I went through is that, my social media, even though I blocked, the certain people and stuff, is that they found a way to still find those people and my business connections. And, all of a sudden, on their business pages, they would be getting, notifications or letters on their business, business pages, or all of a sudden they would look up their business addresses or their home addresses, and they would be getting court documents and stuff sent to their home addresses or their business addresses.
To sort of put this in a frame for our audience, so if you were doing business with a client, this person who had this obsession with you would then find out who those people are and then would send them documents or things that they felt were damaging to you in an attempt to control you or to sabotage those relationships, because their sort of feeling was, if I can't have you, nobody can have you, and nobody is allowed to deal with you unless I say so. So it's a control thing for this person.
That's correct. Yeah. If they would notice somebody new would comment, and they would notice that maybe that person was in a networking group of mine, the next time I would wind up going to that networking group, I would get done with the meeting and they would, take me aside and say, hey, can I talk to you for a second? Next thing I know, they would be pulling out an envelope that had been addressed and gone to them. And I would be mortified, that something would be sent to them in the mail.
Wow. And then so when these people would come to you and say, hey, Kim, I got this package from someone, and this is all this very personal information from you. And what type of personal information would this be? Would this be documenting the court case with this individual?
Mm-hmm.
Or
there would be court documents in there.
And text messages, and it was an attempt to defame you, essentially. Correct. And so how did these people react? Because for me, if this happened to me and I was doing business with you, one, I would be concerned for you because I would feel that I'm not privy to this information, and why is somebody doing this? But also, how do they find me? Mm-hmm. How do they find me from a Facebook? So was this individual, they would see someone like your comments, and then they would go and essentially stalk that person who liked a comment, and then find out everything about that person, and then involve that person personally, not to keep using the alliteration, but they would involve them and find their address and be able to get access to them. Is that correct?
That's correct.
Wow. So really what I was saying about Chris Salgado, what I was discussing with Chris, really hit home with you, because this is something that you have dealt with firsthand.
Yes, absolutely. Yeah, I very much could. It was like when you were having that conversation, for me, it was like reliving everything I had gone through, different networking groups. If there was events that they would be going to, this person would show up at those events, and even if I wasn't there, they would take pictures of it and then put it up on social media, and then refer to my business name and talk about how look at the damage that I could possibly do in this group.
So this is concerning to me for a couple of reasons, and you can maybe go and sort of explain this to our listeners. Did anyone who was involved in these groups find out who this individual was and call the police on them and say, this person is disruptive? They are not only disruptive, they are trying to gain our personal information in a way to involve us, to stalk us, or pursue us, or damage or defame us, or possibly do something to our families. because of their obsession with this one individual who we've randomly met. And this isn't right. I mean, where do those individuals' rights, who aren't even involved, have no history with this person, where do their rights come in?
Well, you bring up a really interesting point. And this is one of the points that I talk about, and one of the things that I really work on trying to get out and talk about when I give my talks, is that, we talk about that we're horrified when we hear about domestic violence and we see pictures and things like that, and we hear things on the news, and we say that's just horrible, something needs to be done about it. But we talk about like it's others' jobs to do something about it, and not realizing that, no, it's our job as a society to do something about it. And, people would sit there and say, we're there with you. We don't hold you accountable. We support you. We care about you. But yet nobody was willing to take that extra step and go to the police and make a police report, which, the more reports you have and somebody else that actually, creates their own story and their own report, it actually makes all the difference in the world, because it's not just my story. It's not just me making, a claim. It's somebody else who is extremely upset, and when you have a community come together and say, we want action, it holds a lot more weight. And that didn't happen. And so, not that I'm trying to sit here and try to throw any blame or say that those people cared any less about me, because, they were very sincere when they said that they cared about me. But at the end of the day, that's what it takes to make a big difference.
I mean, I would agree with that 100%, is that you have to, at some point, the rubber needs to meet the road, right? But I think that, it's interesting that we're examining this because you've seen it in a way that has affected you, where you're essentially saying, hey, I need just some of you guys to come forward. Because if these people had come forward and said, hey, look, I'm also bothered by this, and then this person is being directly affected by this, we need to do something, law enforcement or the court system would have taken action, you feel. But because they didn't do that, and this sort of goes back into sort of a national conversation I feel that we're having right now with, let's say, gun violence, and there's an issue with this, right? And people are saying, well, why didn't they report this person's behavior? Why didn't they say this? And again, we don't want to be in a police state where you're constantly, when you're reporting people and this type of thing, because that's not good either. But there are certain times when you become involved that you should be concerned, and rallying as a community is one way. Just like when there's a missing persons case, and we, for years we just think that the police will deal with this. Well, there's so many of these cases. I'm sure the police are inundated with these types of cases as well. And I've done an episode recently with my good friend Lenora Claire, and she has had these same issues, and it wasn't until she literally just organized everything herself with the police and with private detectives that they finally paid attention to the city of LA, and she was able to get her stalker arrested, and he went to prison, and he's been in and out of jail because, again, this is someone who was very affluent, came from an affluent family, so he had means, so they essentially have nothing better to do when they become obsessed. Now, he was schizoaffective. Do you believe that was your stalker affected by a mental illness, or just narcissistic personality disorder, you feel, or what was that? Or maybe you can't speak to that, but I have conversations that I've had with my own personal therapist. I don't have any documentation that I can give you that would be on record. So but I have my own therapist that had worked with the both of us, so I feel very comfortable with that.
of being able to, give that kind of feedback, that when I was going through all of this, that was a really good person for me to be with, of going through that therapy, because they was able to give that other side, because it's not that any therapist that you're working with isn't a good therapist to work with, but they have never had that ability to interact with that other person. So they're doing their best to go with saying, okay, if people have these atypical personalities, then generally speaking, I would say they probably are most likely to be like this, and that's the best they can do, because they can't document anything with somebody that they haven't ever spent time with. So I had the good fortune having the chance that they had spent time with this person. So, that for me was such a blessing, because they were able to talk to me in a fashion that was able to zone in and say, I can walk you through this from both sides, and be able to help me, through. And, it was very, 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 very difficult, because, we haven't even gotten through, all the different things that were done yet in our conversation, that, that at the, I would say, at the tipping point, I was at the point, at the worst point of this. I had every window covered up. I was working on my laptop out of my bed. I was afraid to get out of my bed. I would go running. I would strategically think what I wanted out of my fridge to eat or drink, and I would strategically count to 3, and I would run to get what I wanted, and would run back to my bed, because I was too afraid to think, who was videoing me? Were they looking in? So
I'm so sorry.
it was hard.
Yeah, I can imagine. I've had friends that have not been through this extreme of a circumstance, but certainly have had people surveil them in their own homes and enter the homes and move things around in an attempt to, again, make them feel like they were going crazy, to manipulate them, logging through their Wi-Fi routers and things like that. Obviously when you do something, interview someone like Chris Salgado, who was on the program that you saw, obviously, who works with this social engineering and cyber stalking cases, you have a lot of people that come out and say, man, this is what happened to me. And, I'm just so sorry that you had to live in your own home in fear, and the person wasn't even there. It was the thought of them. And it was, that's a lot. That's a lot to handle.
Well, yeah.
And I'm glad you're still here.
If I had, a new, friend that person had never, met before, because you have new friends that you meet and stuff like that. And
of course,
they would park in the driveway. Within several days, they would wind up getting a letter in the mail. So it got to the point that I would have to have them park their car behind the RV gate or in my garage in order to protect.
So this person couldn't have their license plate be seen, so then they could be tracked down. This is just, it's staggering to me that so many of these people that were in your life didn't just step up and say, you know what, enough of this. Like, who is this person? Okay, like, why am I getting these? Okay, and then going, because I would assume that this type of thing, also when you're doing it through the mail, also involves a certain level of criminal prosecution as a possibility because you're using the postal system now to stalk and intimidate. And I'm sure there was many laws that were broken. So you're in a protection program, correct? So no one is able to know where you're at, and you're not in the state where this happened and all of this. But the state that you're in now, you helped change some laws with some congressmen. Is that correct?
Yeah.
So why don't you talk a little bit about that with your foundation and what you're doing?
Yeah.
To be proactive.
You know, that was very empowering. I went and spoke in front of the House and
the state House of Representatives,
and both the House and the Senate, and shared my testimony of what I had gone through. And I guess when the first step was the House, and it, unbeknownst to me, is that I was told that they were concerned that it was actually not going to pass in the House because the Democrats were not for this bill. And I'm not sure what the reasons were. But when they had heard all of my testimony, it actually passed 10-0. And I was so excited about that because for me, I was all about, I was like a force to reckon with about this bill.
Sure, that's
because
amazing.
It was making that.
And what is the bill exactly?
It's harassment and stalking on social media is a misdemeanor. And so for me, I was all about this. Like, you know, I was very adamant that this had to take place. I wanted to make sure that no matter how difficult it was to talk about, because when this bill was being talked about, it was very shortly after my experience. And I didn't care how difficult it was to talk about. To me, what it meant for me is that if I could talk about this, that meant that I could go back to the police and I could get them to actually do what I needed them to do. So it meant everything to me to make sure that this bill got passed. So I actually, every step of the way, every time I spoke, I would send an email to my domestic violence investigator and said, this is what I did today. Like, we're one step closer that I can get you to do what I need you to do. You know, I think he hated hearing from me. So, and then.
But you eventually forced them by your activism, you forced them into action, correct?
Yeah, absolutely. And then the next step was speaking in front of the Senate, and there's 8 people in front of the Senate. And that was an even more empowering opportunity because the chairman, you're only supposed to get, I think it was 3.5 minutes to speak. And the chairman, when I got done speaking, he actually said, I think she wants to finish up, and he actually gave me more time to speak. They were so blown away by everything that I had to say about my experiences. Then also, they were just so unbelievably blown away by how many obstacles that I was having to deal with when it came to trying to get law enforcement to actually enforce, because it was just to draw the pick of who it is that showed up to take the report. So I think that for me, when they go around to do the vote, listening to every single one said, may I say something? And listening to all 8 of them had something to say, and they all said something about, we can't allow this. We need to do something with this bill so that she never has to go through this again. And I think for me, actually taking whatever it took to show up that day to just listen to what they had to say was worth every second of the nerves that I had going through me that day.
Sure, that's
so
amazing.
Yeah, and that passed 8-0, and so because it passed simultaneously, it automatically went to the governor and it got signed in then that May by the governor. So that was really, really exciting.
It was in Arizona. Got it. And and when was the law passed?
It was passed in 2020, May of 2021.
So it's a year in the on the books
Yeah, year
so
in the
far.
books.
And what has the impact of this? Now, what is the law called again?
It's harassment and stalking on social media. I'm just starting to hear people just starting to realize that this real law is out there now. So I'm hoping that it will now really start to become a deterrent. So I think it took a little while for it to kind of trickle down from it becoming a law into it trickling down into law enforcement because I think there's just a natural process of it becoming a law and then it actually getting out there for everybody to understand that now it actually is there and that you can actually do something with it. And I'm obviously very well aware of it, and I speak about it and make it very well known.
So where are you speaking at?
I just recently spoke at ASU, and I spoke to 5,000 students because I think it's important for the students to understand, because that's such a critical time in your life.
Absolutely. Absolutely.
You are making such decisions of, getting ready that you could wind up in a relationship that forever turns your life. For me, that was a pivotal time in my life where I did wind up, in a domestic violence relationship. I was 23 years old. That's where my journey started. And, all it takes is that, you have a lack of confidence. And so, that's a great time to have that conversation, is what decisions are you making? You're one step away, always.
Well, it's good that you're giving back and that you're really spreading awareness with youth, especially where this is, nowadays everyone grows up with a smartphone in their hands or a smart device, and this is a whole new world with TikTok and obviously Instagram, social media in general, and there's ways that you can bully people and you can find out things, and it's raising the collective consciousness on this is crucial, and I commend you for the work you're doing and for helping. What is your so you have a foundation that you started after all of this, correct?
It's Envision You Victory Over Violence, and I built a whole program that is based on focusing in on confidence, self-worth, and self-esteem. So the number one issue that as a survivor or as a victim is that we're in it because we're suffering from lack of worth. And the number one reason why we return or we have a difficulty, moving forward in life and have a lot of issues that, take us in different areas is because we don't have the confidence to make the decisions we need. And we, go back because we don't feel like we have the self-worth because we have that gaslighting that is working in our head. So I have a whole program of working on what are the sabotaging behaviorisms that we deal with that have followed us, and what's the why behind it. The why is so important. You talk about that in your TEDx talk, you talk about it in so many of your podcasts and stuff. And what's the why and how are we going to use that why to move us forward?
Yeah, it's turning that why into not that victim mentality of why this happened to me, but it's taking that and moving that into action. Exactly. When you go through trauma.
Yeah. And how do we make that shift?
Yeah, that why to what now?
It's all about shifting it.
Absolutely. Absolutely. That's what it is.
I think it's just for your listeners, it's just so important is that protect yourself out there. there's a lot going on out there that we don't realize that we're getting into.
But in all fairness, I mean, I know, you've said to me, oh, this was, the worst choice I made in my life or worst decision. I said, well, ultimately, I think it could be the best decision because you're now giving back and you're in a place where you're raising awareness for others and you're using you are indeed embodying this why to what now mentality of let me use this experience that has been so horrific for me so others can learn from it. You are really embodying this role of turning your trauma into something that's positive for others. So again, when you said to me, this is the worst decision I ever made in my life, I said, well, I challenge you to think of it as the best decision and the best thing that could have happened to you because you're using this to empower not only yourself but others through your experience and sharing that with the world. And that really is the most amazing thing of all this. You're not hiding in your house. You are getting out there. You are reaching out to individuals like myself to share your story, and you're getting laws passed. And even, on a smaller level, that is still going to make a big impact. And that might actually save at least that one person from going through what you went through. I mean, I think you feel that, right?
I do. My biggest mission, and I wear my hope around my neck, and that is that my biggest hope all the time is that I don't want others to take 25 years to find, their worth and to make mistakes I made.
Sure.
That their journey is much shorter than mine was to find where their purpose is. And if I can do that, then everything that I went through was absolutely worth it because it got me to where I am today and is getting them where they need to be very, very quickly. And that's the greatest gift ever. So that's what I want for all of them, is that everyone is so precious.
Absolutely. So Kimberly, where can we find your foundation? Where can we find out a little bit about you?
Yeah, if you go to envisionyouvictory.org, that's the website. Envision You Victory.
Envision You Victory.
And you is YOU, not the letter U.
envisionyouvictory.org.
Yeah, that's the best way to find us, and all the information's on there. And everybody, it doesn't matter where you're located. That's the great thing, is that we do offer twice a month free classes for survivors, and we do it via Zoom, so you can join us and be part of it, and we can be there for you.
That's wonderful. You're taking the first steps of really getting out of living in this trauma and embracing it and taking and owning your power. And I really commend you for that. I mean, it's a great feeling. I know.
Oh, thank you. Yeah. Well, you have to own yourself and not let others own you.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Well, on that note, thank you so much, Kimberly Miner. It's so great to have you on the program. I appreciate you.
Thank you. This is a great place to be and visit.
Yeah, it's really tough. And I have really been, I've had a stalker, and I've had someone who also in a relationship, they were a narcissist, and they really went about to try to dismantle my life, reaching out to very personal and longtime connections of mine and people that were very influential in my life growing up, trying their best to sabotage me. And again, all at the end of the day, right before the pandemic, to try to loop me back into their world. I love speaking about these things, and I thank Kimberly for her courage to come on the program and share as much of her story as she can, that she feels comfortable with. I also commend all the work that she's doing because, look, at the end of the day, my mother was also a victim of coercive control and a victim of a narcissist and a manipulator and a sociopath. And not everyone needs to have the same outcome that my mother had. And I feel it's really key to learn from people like Kimberly and other guests that I've had to really be able to, learn how to get out of these situations, learn how to avoid these situations, learn how to and know that you're not alone. Really, at the end of the day, you're not alone in these situations. And I think that's probably the biggest takeaway from this is there's a message of hope that you can come out and things will get better. You can leave these situations. And so I'm just really, really grateful to have had Kimberly join the program today. Look, on that note, I am Collier Landry, and this is Moving Past Murder. Thanks, y'all. This podcast is made possible by support from listeners just like you. Please subscribe via Apple Podcasts, Spotify, Audible. Find us on YouTube, youtube.com/Collier Landry. The film A Murder in Mansfield is available on Investigation Discovery, Discovery Plus, and Amazon Prime Video. This podcast is a production of Don't Touch My Radio in association with RSA Entertainment. Please visit mpmpodcast.com to show your support today.